Good morning and welcome to this YouTube Live. I haven't actually been on StreamYard for quite a while. In fact, this is my first live of 2025 and I suddenly realized we're halfway through the year. So welcome. So I had to just familiarize myself with how to use it again. But here we are. So my name is Anuska Taylor. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're watching the replay, welcome. Today's topic is your voice doesn't lie. Something I say a lot to anyone that will listen to me, something that I write a lot in my social media content. I think I've even got it on my website. And I want to talk more about this today because it's so important to understand. And it's really the foundation of my work, that your voice is always revealing everything that's going on within, stuff that you're conscious of, and mostly what you're not conscious of. And that's why then the voice becomes a really powerful vehicle for your personal transformation. So it's really revealing what you're consciously and unconsciously either avoiding, fearing, running away from, but also what you are identifying with and embracing and also desiring. So it's such a powerful tool for learning more about yourself if you understand what you're hearing and what you're working with. So before I get going, as I said, my name's Anuska Taylor. I'm an experienced voice coach. I've been training voices now for over 15 years. I've been singing myself since I think I was born. I think I just came out singing. So I don't really know anything other than singing. And I sort of moved into the speech side of voice about 8 years ago now, because I realized there was this gap in what was available to people. It's either singing lessons or acting lessons, or you go and see a speech therapist. And most people, if you're a professional and you are presenting and you're pitching and you're in meetings and you are maybe doing podcasts or whatever, you don't want to be an actor, you don't want to be a singer, and you don't need speech therapy. So I try and sort of bridge the gap between really helping you understand your voice in a more profound way with some of that speech therapy background, although I'm not a speech therapist, so I don't work clinically with people, but also bringing more of the creative aspect of voice from my own singing, from my singing days. And then, of course, what makes, I think, my work quite unique is this psychological impact that the voice has. And I studied, and I'm continuing to study, it's a never-ending journey, Jungian psychology. Started on my own individuation journey, about nearly 10 years ago now. Worked with a number of incredible coaches, teachers, and mentors myself, and then trained to actually use Jungian psychology within a coaching methodology. So none of my work is really clinical. It's very much about transformation. It's about possibility and potential and moving you forward. Yes, we do have to look behind. We do have to look at our past, but we don't stay there. We use it really as a springboard to move you forward. So did I want to say anything else? Let me just think. It's Saturday morning here for me. I don't know where you are in the world, but yeah, it's Saturday morning for me here. And I've had quite a big week. So I kept pushing this out because I was like, oh, I don't have time to do this today. So I thought I'll do it on Saturday. So what I think is really important is your voice, what is consciously and unconsciously being expressed is really what people are listening to. You might think it's all about the words. And if I just say the right words, get the right words out, get the right facts, figures and data, that's what matters. But really what people are listening to, and what you're listening to in my voice too, is the vocal energy, is the tone and the quality of your voice, because it's all revealing things. And coming back to the whole title of this, it's not random. Your voice isn't random. It is always revealing everything that's really going on if you understand what you're listening for. So what I wanted to start with then is really talk a little bit about the mind, what we kind of call the map of the psyche, and look first of all at the conscious and the unconscious mind, and talk a little bit about that, and then how that relates to the voice, and then how you can actually work with this. Because I think my work, as I said, is Jungian based. Freud is obviously probably the more mainstream psychological approach. So I will sort of briefly mention how it differs to Jungian psychology. And I've got a little diagram here that which I created myself, which I was very proud of. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Did that all by myself on Canva. So I want to talk first of all about the conscious and the unconscious mind, because the goal with everything, the goal with all of this, whether you're working on your voice or whoever you work with, is really about expanding your level of consciousness. And as you can see from that diagram, our conscious mind is so, so tiny. It's literally the tip of the iceberg, which is why I wanted to use an image of an iceberg. Now, Jung doesn't really talk about the pre-conscious, but I've put it in there because think about the pre-conscious as like the subconscious. Oh, thank you, Susan. Think about the pre-conscious like the subconscious. So it's just below the surface. But what you'll find within mainstream, particularly on social media, it's all about the subconscious mind. Let's rewire the subconscious mind, is something you probably hear all the time. But from my perspective, and also, psychologically speaking, the subconscious is just below the surface. So I want to talk about this because from a Jungian perspective, it's really conscious and unconscious. And then Jung sort of split the unconscious into personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. But I've added in the pre-conscious just because it's so popular. The subconscious, that's what everyone talks about. But I think when you focus on the subconscious, you're really missing out on most of the gold that's within your psyche. And that's really my work, but it's deep and it can be very challenging for people because it really isn't rainbows and kittens. It can be very, very confronting and very challenging when you go into these depths of the mind. So I think people stay what I would describe as on the surface or just below the surface because it feels a lot safer to the ego. So that brings me on actually very nicely to the conscious mind. And we can think about, as I said, the conscious mind is the tip of the iceberg. So it's really about your level of awareness. And as I said at the start, the goal is really to expand your consciousness, expand your level of awareness so that that tip of the iceberg just becomes bigger. And you can think about your conscious mind as very much your level of awareness, but also very much tied to your identity, who you believe you are, what you've been taught you are. So, for example, for me, it's my name, it's the ego, the I. I am Anuska. I am a voice coach. I love to sing. I'm not a very good dancer. I would describe myself as a social introvert. Don't really see myself as an introvert, but not an extrovert in the true sense of the word. And actually, they are both Jungian terms as well. I am kind, I'm caring. And so we very much identify with these labels, these identities, and we all have them. It's also things like I'm British, I'm white, my parents are, one of my parents is from the north of England, the other one's from the south of England. So we very much identify with all of these things. And in and of itself, there's nothing really wrong with that. It's just when we overly identify with it, that's when we get stuck. So we create these identities and these labels, and then we really create then a persona or a social mask to really uphold these labels and identities that we have bought into. Now, we don't sit there and buy into them. It happens very, very gradually. So, but you'll find that there are certain labels and identities that you very strongly want to hold on to. Like I know I lived in Australia for a long time, and I really never wanted to lose the fact that going to sound weird maybe, but I never wanted to lose the fact that I was British, was very strongly attached to my British identity. But I lived in Melbourne for 12 plus years. And when you've been living somewhere for that long, you do start to kind of think, am I Australian? Am I British? What does it mean to be British? What does it mean to be Australian? But I'm like, no, I'm definitely British. So I'm very proud to have lived there. It's an incredible country and I had an amazing time. And I am actually a citizen, Australian citizen, just because I've been there so long. But I still really identify from my ego's perspective as I am British. So these labels then, as I say, these really then determine how we see ourselves, what we think is possible, who am I, what I've been told I can and can't do. So this is all the conscious mind, all things that you're aware of. And as I say, we create then this social mask or these personas or personae to help us uphold these identities. And as I said at the start, it's not so much there's a problem with that, it's when you overly identify with it that it becomes a problem. Now, the pre-conscious then is just below the surface of your awareness. And Freud talked about it as the pre-conscious. So he had the conscious, the pre-conscious, and the unconscious. Jung was really just conscious and unconscious. But I'm putting it in there, as I said at the start, because it's so popularized now in mainstream social media posts about manifestation and personal development, the subconscious. But think about the pre-conscious or the subconscious as content or material that you can easily retrieve. It's very easily accessible to you. You might have to think about it for a bit, but you can access it. And it also, really importantly, makes sense to you. So let me give you an example. So, for example, memories, recalling memories. So let's say someone said to you, well, what did you do for your birthday last year? And you're like, let me think about that. Now it's there, but you've just got to retrieve it. So it's in the pre-conscious. It's not in your conscious mind, but it's available to access very easily. So that's something we can all relate to. So we all utilize that. But I would also argue, because limiting beliefs are talked about so much in the world of personal development, I would argue limiting beliefs also fall in the pre-conscious, because we're all aware of what we believe is our limitations. So I hear all the time, as a singing teacher, as a singer, I'm just not a singer. I'm just tone deaf. And I'm always saying to people, you're not tone deaf. I mean, like 2% of the population are tone deaf. So it's unlikely you'll be tone deaf. So, but you would have very, very real reasons why you believe that. So I can't sing, I'm tone deaf. For example, I'm giving this as an example because it's something I hear all the time. Because someone probably told you at some point you couldn't sing, or you were tone deaf, or maybe you heard a recording, or people laughed at you when you were younger, or a teacher told you, I mean, I've heard this before as well, get out of the choir, you can't sing, etc., etc. So these are things that you can easily retrieve. They make sense to you, and you can actually come up with the evidence to support them. So for me, that's what a limiting belief is. Now, it's not that it's not helpful to look at those, but you're really just working, as we can see from my beautiful iceberg diagram, you are really just working literally just under the surface. And I did the kind of limiting belief work for a long time before I discovered Jungian psychology. And nothing really changed for me. It was like I was kind of aware, but I was still basically operating on the surface, because there was something holding that in place that I really had no awareness of, because it was unconscious. So this is where most people stop. And in mainstream, as I said, mainstream like coaching, mainstream personal development, that's where people stop, at the pre-conscious, subconscious place. And what my coach always said, it's like you're just rearranging the deck chairs. So you might feel a little bit better, you might have some insights, but nothing is really changing. So to transform, whether it's your life, your business, your voice, your body, whatever you want to transform, you have to go deeper and you have to look at the unconscious. And that's what my coaching is all about. But as I said, it's very confronting. You've got to be ready for it. And you might have to go through years of working more at the surface level, like I did for years, the limiting belief work, to realize that you have to go deeper. And there is something so much more. So the personal unconscious, as Jung called it, or the unconscious, as Freud called it, is really repressed memories, wishes, fears, and the sort of the conditioning that drives our life. Now, this is unique to you. It's very much tied to your personal history, your personal identity. And from Jung's perspective, I guess the difference between Jung and Freud here was Freud really saw the personal unconscious, or these repressed memories and wishes and fears. It was really just a dumping ground for all the things that we don't want to look at, we don't want to face. So he really saw it in quite a limiting way. Jung, on the other hand, saw it as both the things that we are running away from, the things that we think are undesirable, but also in the personal unconscious is our gifts and talents, is the things that maybe as a child, we were an incredible musician, but we grew up in a home of doctors. And so being a creative, being an artist wasn't socially acceptable and wasn't really encouraged. A bit like if you've ever seen the film Billy Elliot with the boy that's learning to dance, it wasn't really socially acceptable, but he loved it so much. And a lot of people face this, but it could also be the other way. Maybe you've grown up in a home of artists and creatives, and wanting to do something more intellectual perhaps is looked frowned upon. So a lot of our gifts and talents live in the personal unconscious, as Jung called the shadow, and he even termed this specifically the golden shadow. So from his perspective then, it's both our light and our dark, whereas from Freud, it was really just all your darkness lives there. So you do need to look at it, but you probably don't want to stay there. And that's what makes, for me, Jung's work so powerful and so transformational. And we're not even there yet because we've still got the collective unconscious. Now, with the personal unconscious, the shadow parts of ourselves, this is heavily defended by your ego, your sense of self, your sense of I. And so anything that doesn't fit with your persona, what you're conscious of, that social mask, will go into this personal unconscious. Now, what is the difference then between sort of the unconscious and the pre-conscious is whereby the pre-conscious will make some logical sense to you. As I said before, it's not going to be completely crazy for you to see, well, I have a limiting belief around I can't sing because when I was 10, my teacher told me I was a terrible singer. We can make sense of it. The unconscious will not make logical sense. And actually to the point where you would vehemently deny it's got anything to do with you. And that's why it's so challenging, but also so transformational. I'm going to give you an example from my own life, which I've talked about before, to show you what that means in a second, because I think it's really key to this. If you can make sense of it, it probably isn't the thing that's really holding you back. So the personal unconscious then is unlike the pre-conscious, difficult to access and doesn't make logical sense to you. And that's why it's very difficult to do by yourself. Now, I just want to briefly talk about the collective unconscious, which was very much a big part of Jung's work and what made his work so powerful. So this is the deepest depths of our psyche, and this is the universal mind. So whereas the personal unconscious was very much tied to your personal history, this is really what connects you to everyone. It's beyond your personal history. It's beyond your personal life experiences, your life story. And this, for me, is really powerful and really important that we all learn to tap into this, because this is the birthplace of creativity, of your imagination and your intuition. So you will have experienced this, but you may have just, dismissed it as I don't really understand this. But we've all had experiences where we have this intuitive nudge to contact someone, but it doesn't make any sense, or to go somewhere, or to buy something, or to visit somewhere. We've all had that experience. And that's coming from this sort of collective unconscious, something that doesn't make logical sense to our ego. So it's really these inherited aspects of our mind, and they show up particularly in our dreams as well. And also from Jung's perspective, the active imagination work as well. So dreams are a very big part of my work too, like beginning to explore what your dreams are really trying to tell you, because this is tapping into this collective unconscious aspect of your mind. But again, I mean, this is big stuff, and it's all kind of interconnected. Also, I mean, I believe we're all creative. So it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm a singer, I'm a songwriter, but you could be a great cook or a gardener or whatever. You might knit, etc. It doesn't really matter what you do, but I think it's the human condition to be creative. And I just thinking about my own experiences of writing music, that sometimes a song, it just feels like the song just comes out of nowhere. Like I'm not logically trying to write a song. I just sit at the piano and I start playing, and then a song emerges from me. And that's really this collective unconscious aspect. But you would have your own version of that depending on what your creative outlet or your artistic outlet is. So think about that, whatever it is for you, whether you can think of you get this kind of creative inspiration for something. Maybe you're a great writer. It could be anything. And you just get into this state of flow, and it just seems to emerge from you. It seems to flow from you. So this is this collective unconscious. And that's why we want to tap into this. So if you just see the subconscious as it, or even the unconscious as things I don't want to look at, you're really cutting off half your power. And that's why for me, like, Jungian psychology is incredibly powerful and incredibly transformational, because we're still addressing the things that Freud would have addressed in terms of, what am I running away from? What have I sort of repressed? But we're going so much deeper to have that deeper experience. So let me just, if I can get rid of this. There we go. So why does this matter then in terms of your voice? And what's this got to do with your voice? Well, your voice has a persona, a social mask, and your voice has a shadow. And you might not have thought about this before, but your voice is revealing both what you think is desirable and acceptable, but also what you're trying to run away from, what you're avoiding, what you fear. And you can think about the ego as your internal communications director. So it decides what you show to the world, and it decides what you should not show to the world. And again, it's human nature, different circumstances. The ego will say, okay, well, when you talk to your boss, you can speak like this and you can do this. But when you speak to your child or your partner, well, then you can speak like this. Now, again, coming back to what I said before, the problem is when you overly identify with it, when you overly identify with this persona as being who you are. Because in and of itself, having some discernment when you're speaking, we need that. We can't just say whatever's in our head to whoever is around us. We need some level of discernment. But the persona is really more about avoiding and defending than about a sort of genuine desire to connect and actually sort of build those sort of really strong relationships with people. So you have to really tune in. Is the way I'm speaking, is there a sense of this is fearfully driven, or is this driven from a place of love and connection? Because that's really the only way you're going to know. And I guarantee a lot of the way you're using your voice is very much driven by fear. And so if it's driven by fear and you're kind of overly identifying with this persona and running away from your shadow, it's going to be exhausting, for one, physically and emotionally. It's going to be very inauthentic, and you will be micromanaging your voice and your words. And that's when you get in your head, because you're trying really hard. I literally had a conversation with someone a couple of weeks ago. I went to a business networking event at a bank, and I was talking to this woman, and she was saying that in certain meetings, she felt she could say certain things, and then in other meetings, she couldn't. And she herself said, it's exhausting because I've got to remember, like, okay, well, with them I can say this, but with them I can't say this. And that's what we're talking about here. So there's a level of discernment, yes, but most people take that so far away that they lose themselves in the process. And it's driven by fear, and it's really driven by this desire to be accepted, to be loved, to be validated, to be noticed. So what we're looking to do here then is to expand our level of consciousness. And then we can choose how we communicate versus be driven by our conditioning, be driven by avoiding the shadow and upholding the persona. It's like, no, I can choose. So maybe me saying this is going to upset people, for example, but I know that it's something that I'm going to be saying it from a place of love and connection. I know it needs to be said, but I know it might upset people, and I'm okay with that. Whereas the ego would be like, well, you can't say that because you might upset people. And I was very much taught this growing up. Like my mum would literally say this to me, well, you can't have that conversation with your brother Anuska because you're not allowed to say that. So I was literally told what I could and couldn't say. And then all that ends up happening is you, as in me or you put these brakes on your voice, and you end up actually shoving a lot of anger into your shadow, which is what happened with me. So perhaps I'll talk about that now then, because I was talking about before how the unconscious is things that you're not aware of, and to the point where you would literally dismiss it at all as being a part of you. That's how you know it's unconscious, because it triggers you, but you really don't see yourself in it at all. Now, it doesn't mean you are a direct reflection of that, but there's some element that's you. So to give you an example, and I have given this example before, but it really drove my life so strongly. My persona was very much a people pleaser. I'm gentle, I'm kind, I want to get along with people, I want people to like me. All very noble things. There's nothing in wrong with that. But I denied my own voice. I denied my own anger. I wouldn't allow myself to express when I was upset with people, or I'd try and soften it, or I'd sort of say something and then I'd retract it. And all that ended up happening, because I didn't identify with being someone that was angry, I kept attracting angry people, angry partners, angry bosses. In my family, there was anger. And it would really trigger me. It would really upset me, particularly because I didn't identify as someone that was angry. But I was seeing my own anger, but it was just so unconscious to me, I couldn't identify with it. And this was in the personal unconscious for me. And I had to actually start to integrate it. So it's not that then we go around punching people in the face and swearing and shouting and just saying whatever we want. It's then really, from Jung's perspective, it's really an integration of the anger or whatever the thing that we pushed into the shadow is. So for me, it was really about allowing myself to express anger. But it's done from a place of integration, because when it's not integrated, that's when people go to extreme lengths of violence and cruelty and murder and all of those things that we see in the news. And we're like, but that's just really angry people. But it's unintegrated anger. What I'm talking about here is integrated anger, which means there's some level of discernment, but I'm not afraid to express my anger. Now, you might also be the other side of the coin. You might not identify with that. You might have no problem being angry, but you might be someone on the other side of the coin that you struggle with vulnerable conversations. So you can tell people very directly, you're very happy to have those challenging conversations, but you're very uncomfortable having more vulnerable conversations, telling people you love them, having those heart-to-heart conversations. So that's what you run away from. But I'll come to this at the end, but it's really beginning to notice the patterns and themes in your life. So for me, it was lots of angry people, the fact that it triggered me, and that when I felt angry as well, when anger did arise in me, I tried to push it away. I tried to avoid it. I tried to, no, they're the angry person, not me, because I'm loving and kind and gentle. But I was really seeing my own anger. So this is the power of this work, because from a voice perspective, if you are running away like I was from anger, you are not going to be able to access authority, strength, power in your voice. Because often actually when I'm getting clients to find more strength in the voice and singing as well, actually, I will get them to channel a more angry energy. And it does something physiologically, the voice sort of changes. And so there's definitely this connection. So that's just one example. And it really drove my life for so long. And whenever I felt angry, I felt enormous guilt. If I did express anger, usually I'd get a massive amount of pushback because I'd been told it was wrong. And then I'd live with this enormous amount of guilt. And then I would usually go back and say, oh, I didn't really mean it, when I did mean it, but I just was uncomfortable owning it. So I hope that kind of makes sense. And this is deep work, as I said at the start. This is why a lot of people stay at the subconscious level, because this is quite challenging to the ego, that I've really got to look at myself and look at the things that I may have judged in other people that have got nothing to do with me, but they're really parts of myself. So from a voice perspective, then, we're all aware on a conscious level of how we can shapeshift. We all do it. I do it. You do it. Different circumstances. I'm in an interview. I want to make a good impression. I'm probably going to be more aware of my voice. I'm probably going to articulate more clearly. I'm going to be thinking. And maybe if I know I speak fast, I might make a conscious effort to slow down. I might make a conscious effort to enunciate more clearly, maybe project my voice. And then I go home and I go back to mumbling and not really opening my mouth when I speak and pulling my sound back and not really making a lot of effort, because it's much more of a casual approach to speech. So we all do this to greater or lesser extent. But as I've said a number of times now, I just want to reiterate, it's not so much that it's a problem. It's only a problem if you overly identify with it, because the bigger the persona, the bigger the shadow. So the more you uphold this particular identity, the more the opposite's going to be pushed into the shadow. It requires an enormous amount of psychological energy to keep it under the surface. And that's when people end up getting sick, physically sick, mentally ill, et cetera, et cetera. So I personally believe like physical and mental illness are very sort of closely aligned. So if we don't allow ourselves to express things, it has to go somewhere, and it will normally be manifested in disease in the body, illness, etc. And I see a lot as well with people that lose their voice when they're going through really traumatic experiences, because they are perhaps not allowing themselves to feel and to go there emotionally. So the body kind of takes over, because this energy has to go somewhere. It doesn't just go nowhere. So that's the conscious, and I think we can all relate to that. Now, the pre-conscious, as I already kind of mentioned, could be limiting beliefs you have around your voice. I hear this a lot. Well, I'm just not a public speaker. I could never do that. So that would be a sort of in the pre-conscious or the subconscious. It's a limiting belief. You're aware of it. You've probably got some evidence to support why you don't think you're a speaker. You've listened to your voice. I just don't have an expressive voice. And I've got the evidence because I've listened to myself and it's not expressive. So that would be in the sort of pre-conscious. But the unconscious, as I said, is what we don't know that we don't know, and that we would literally not identify with as being us. And that's why it's so powerful, but also so challenging. So from a voice perspective, then, from my perspective, the unconscious really reveals itself through these pervasive vocal habits. So maybe you are someone that speaks really fast. Maybe you're someone that mumbles, as two examples, because they're so common. But you kind of speak fast or mumble regardless of who you're talking to. Now, you might slow down, as I said. You might be a bit more conscious if you're in an interview and you want to make a bit more effort. But generally speaking, you just speak fast. You just mumble. Your voice sounds weak. Your voice is loud, whatever. Fill in the blank. The sort of the pervasive habit that you notice. Now, of course, if the habit is serving you in a conscious way, then that's great. But if you know it's kind of limiting you, then it's something you really need to explore and look at. And as I said, really common, speaking fast, probably one of the most common things people ask me about. The most popular videos I've got on YouTube are about how do I slow down? It's an emotional issue, first and foremost. It's in the unconscious. So me just giving you a couple of exercises, you're not going to slow down. You might be able to slow down through an interview for half an hour, but you'll just go back, because on some level, the speaking fast, the mumbling, the weak voice, the pulling the voice into the throat, the booming, loud, broadcasting voice, whatever it is for you, is serving you unconsciously. So what can you do? This is the million-dollar question. I'm going to give you a few things to think about. As I said at the start, this is really difficult to do by yourself, because your mind, your ego will reject this and say, no, it's got nothing to do with me. So what is probably the real root cause? Your mind will most likely reject. So the first thing is bringing awareness to your limiting habits. So maybe listening to yourself or getting someone to give you some feedback and becoming aware of those limiting habits, and really beginning to take the responsibility that they aren't random, but they're serving you in some way. So it's not about beating yourself up. It's not about blaming yourself. It's not about, ripping yourself to shreds at all. This is just an awareness exercise. And these habits are trying to communicate something to you. The goal is trying to decipher what, and that's what can be challenging, because it's unconscious by definition. Then think about, in terms of your habits, like, what is the focus of your vocal energy? Is it inward or is it outward? So is it inward? Is it internal? Do you pull your voice back? Do you speak at the back of your throat? Do you mumble? Do you not open your mouth when you speak? Do you swallow your sound? Is there limited expression, limited power? These would all suggest to me a voice that's inward. Or is your voice more externalized, outward facing? So this could be you are someone with a very loud voice. You broadcast when you speak. Everyone knows you're in the room. There's a lot of strain, a lot of force. Maybe you lose your voice because you're always pushing your voice out. You might be someone that's quite aggressive, domineering. Maybe you don't really listen. You always have to be talking. And again, there's on a spectrum. You're not going to be all one or all the other. There's a lot of gray between these. But think about, am I more inward or outward facing with my voice? Because that's going to tell you a lot to start with about what's sort of really driving your voice as well. And then think about whatever you have worked out as your kind of main default pattern. What is the opposite of this? So if your voice is outward facing, think about the kind of person that have more of an inward facing voice. Or if your voice is inward facing, think about someone with more of an outward facing voice. Maybe if you can, think about someone that you know that has this kind of voice. And then this is where the ego is going to resist. But think about, well, how do I judge this person? How do I label them? So one thing I hear a lot from speakers is they don't want to sound too over the top, too performative, too dramatic when they speak. So they judge people, speakers, not talking about actors because that's sort of acceptable, but they judge people that are very expressive and over the top when they speak. But I know that, sorry, I just got distracted. I'm not very good at this at the moment. I get distracted. It's fine, Susan. Thank you for leaving a comment. I've got to learn how to not look at the comments because I get really distracted. But yes, my voice struggles to bring up the depth I know I've reached and integrate it. So yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully what I'm going to share will help you to work through that. So think about the opposite and then think about, how do I judge this person? How do I label this person? You've got to be really honest with yourself. And how do they trigger me? So as I said, often for people who really avoid more expressive voices, they've made expression wrong because they look at people that maybe they look at actors, or perhaps they just find these very over-the-top expressive voices annoying. And they're me, and look at me, and I'm amazing. And it's like, I don't want to be that person. So that goes in the shadow. And then the persona becomes this voice that's dreary and dull and boring. But you can see it's really about integration. It's not about one or the other. We need both. It's about integration. But if you make it wrong, you won't integrate it. That's the problem. So I always say to people with that kind of dull, dreary, monotone voice, you have to be okay with being perceived as more expressive and more over the top and more dramatic. Because if you avoid it, you're never going to allow it. You are never. The ego will resist it completely. So that's the second point. Look at the opposite to what you think your voice persona is. How do you judge it? Do people that you know trigger you that have that kind of voice? And really just start to explore that. Then what you need to think about, how does this habit then serve me? How does me not being, using this example, how does me not being expressive serve me? What do I avoid? Well, I avoid probably people noticing me. When my voice is kind of dreary, dull, and boring, I'm just flying under the radar. No one really notices me. Probably no one's really listening to me. So I feel safe because I'm not really seen. And the ego fears vulnerability more than anything. Being seen, being heard, being looked at, that emotional connection. That's why romantic relationships are so challenging for the ego, because it wants them for the safety and security, but it fears them because now I'm really going to be seen, and that's terrifying. So this is about, how does this habit serve me? And then what do I avoid? it's kind of similar, but sometimes it's helpful to kind of think about these. What do I avoid by identifying strongly with this persona or this identity that I'm currently holding on to? So this dreary, dull voice, you know, what do I avoid? Well, kind of what I've said already. I avoid really being noticed. I avoid really being seen. And that's what the ego fears. But all of this work, this is not about persona swapping. So it's not about, okay, well, I've gone from a dreary, dull voice. Now I'm just going to become ridiculously over the top, dramatic, expressive, performative, and I'm just going to push all of the other side of my voice away. It's not that. It's an integration. It's a blending. It's a think more gray. That's probably not a very good analogy. Versus less black and white, think more gray. Like, how can I bring a little bit of this into my voice? And you've got to be okay with people potentially criticizing you or making a comment. Oh, Anuska, you're sounding more, you know, what's happened to your voice? You're sounding more dramatic these days or theatrical. You've got to be okay with that, because I can tell you that your true voice is free, it's open, it's powerful and expressive. But also you have a choice. So you're not limited by this social mask that you feel you've got to hold on to, this identity. And that's why a lot of this work really is about a changing of identity. This is a lot about identity work, because the ego is all about upholding a particular identity, like I said at the start. So this work is really about almost allowing that old identity to die, which is why it's so challenging, and bringing in this new, more aligned, more authentic identity. And that's really the power of this work. Now, hopefully you can see as you work on your voice, this impacts every area of your life, not just your voice, how you show up in relationships, friendships, at work, in your business, everything. You're going to learn so much about yourself through this deeper exploration of your voice. Plus, the byproduct is your voice will work better, sound better, and feel better, regardless of your accent. It's just going to function so much better. So I hope that that has helped you a little bit. This is really complex. I've tried to simplify it as much as I can without dumbing it down so much that you lose the kind of essence of it. But if you want some help with this, I do have a special offer for July only. You can book a 2-hour private masterclass with me. I've only got spots available in July, £500, 2-hour private masterclass. And we can look at this. We can really look at anything you want to with your voice. But normally there will be an element of the physical side, the voice training side, but a lot of it will also be emotionally, how is your voice serving you? So you might want to speak slower, or you might want to speak clearer, but how does speaking unclear, mumbling, or fast serve you? Because then when you do the voice exercises, they're going to be so much more powerful. So if you are interested in that, I'll put the link below. Only, I don't know how many spots I've got, but limited number of spots till the end of the month. And then normally you can work with me across an 8-month program. And maybe you can see now why it's an 8-month program too, because this is deep and it transforms everything in your life. So it's not just your voice becomes a byproduct. But thank you so much. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to comment below. Thank you, Susan, for your engagement today. And I will maybe see you on another live, but I will definitely see you next week on another video. I release weekly videos, so there will always be a video out every week. And if you enjoyed today's video, please do give me a like as well. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you soon.